The weight of oaths. The world was dying when the Iron Wolves arrived. From orbit, the strike cruiser Vargbjorn hung like a steel fang above the embattled world of Karen's Gate. Below, hive spires burned from crown to underhive, and the oceans glowed with chemical filth. Vox traffic rose from the surface as a single ragged scream. Distress calls, chanted litanies, orders, and death cries, all braided into one endless plea. It was the sound of a world that had finally realized no one was coming, until the wolves did. In the ship's fighting cage, Hakon Greymane moved with the heavy grace of a veteran predator. He and Bjarki circled each other, bareheaded and stripped to combat harnesses, boots thudding on the scarred deck. Bjarki lunged, laughter on his lips. Hakon caught the punch, turned with the motion and drove his knee into Bjarki's ribs. The impact echoed off the bars. They crashed to the deck together, grappling like Fenrisian ice bears, each seeking purchase. Betting tokens changed hands outside the cage. Other Astartes watched with the calm interest of warriors who had seen too many bouts to be impressed by blood alone. Hakon rolled his hips, reversed their positions, and locked his forearm across Bjarki's throat. Pressure built. A few more heartbeats and something important would break. Bjarki slapped the deck twice in the old signal. Hakon released it once and rose in one smooth motion, offering a hand. Bjarki took it, grinning even as he rubbed at his throat. "One day I'll put you on your back, Greymane." "Perhaps one day I will allow it," Hakon said. Enough bruising each other, a new voice rumbled. Skorvald Ironseer, wolf priest of the Iron Wolves, stood by the cage with arms folded across his skull-marked breastplate. A chain of teeth, human and otherwise, hung across his chest. "The Jarl summons you. He would prefer your bones intact." Hakon stepped out of the cage, Bjarki falling into stride beside him. Skorvald joined them as they walked through Vargbjorn's gunmetal corridors, the distant thrumming of engines a constant undercurrent. "You have been quiet of late, Hakon," Skorvald said, "even for you." "I have been considering," Hakon replied, "a dangerous pastime if you do too much of it." The wolf priest's tone was dry. "What gnaws at your thoughts?" "We fall upon worlds as storms," Hakon said slowly. "We kill, we save, we leave. For us, it is another campaign. For them, it is the only war they will ever know. I wonder how much they truly understand of what we are and what we do, of what our oaths cost them, and us." "They understand enough," Skorvald said. "They know that when monsters come screaming from the void, men in grey and iron fall from the sky to stand between them and the dark. That is all the Imperium requires of their understanding." Hakon made a non-committal sound. "If you want deeper philosophy, talk to the rune priests," Skorvald added. "You and I keep the pack alive long enough to die well. That is work enough." They reached a junction. Ahead, a corridor led toward the strategium. To the side, a narrow passage sloped to the ship's chapel. "Jarl Ulfric will want your mind still as the ice," Skorvald said. "Go cleanse it." Hakon nodded once and turned aside into the chapel. The space was low-roofed for an Astartes vessel, forcing even giants to bow their heads. Candles burned in rows, their smoke curling toward a battered aquila forged from scavenged field relics. Statues lined the walls. The Emperor, stern and distant. Leman Russ, caught mid-charge. Nameless heroes of the chapter. Hakon walked down the central aisle until he reached a worn plinth. The name on it had been half erased by the touch of gauntleted hands, but Hakon could still read it. Ragnar half-word. He traced the letters with one fingertip. Ragnar, who had bound himself to 3 failing worlds with oaths no single pack could possibly meet. Ragnar, who had spread his warriors too thin trying to keep his promises. Ragnar, who had died howling his defiance as daemons tore him apart on the last world still burning. The wolf priests called it tragedy. The Jarl called it foolishness gilded with courage. The sagas called it a warning. "How many oaths can a warrior keep?" Hakon murmured, "before even gene-forged shoulders break?" The stone did not answer. The ship's distant engines did. Hakon bowed his head for a moment, then turned and left. The question did not leave him. It sank its teeth in and hung there. The strategium glowed with hololithic light when he entered. Karen's Gate hung in the air as a slowly turning sphere, wrapped in red threat runes. Hives burned like infected wounds. Jarl Ulfric Ironpelt stood at the center on a raised dais, his winter sea armor chased with runes, the iron wolf skull on his pauldron gleaming. Magos Tactica LX9 hovered nearby on a cradle of suspensors, mechadendrites flickering. Planetary disposition, Ulfric said. 217 PDF regiments on initial roll, LX9 rasped. 57 remain at acceptable combat strength. 8 have gone over to the enemy. 31 are annihilated or combat ineffective. Lord Commander Vardek commands the Traitor Corps, supported by cult militias and imported warbands. Confirmed demonic manifestations in 3 hives. The hollow shifted to show 1 hive, a vast, tiered city crowned in spires. Hive Galatea, Ulfric said. Tithing Nexus, Data Stack Archive, Manufactoria for void ship plasma regulators. If it falls, half this subsector fights blind and mute. The view zoomed further, down to one section of wall marked with a pulsing crimson rune. Little North Wall breach. Vardek has massed armor and artillery against Galatea's northern curtain, LX9 continued. A section collapsed 6 hours ago. Remaining PDF and Sororitas forces are attempting to hold a breach wide enough for super-heavy armor. Ulfric turned, his gaze sweeping the gathered officers. It lingered on Hakon. "We are not here to save a pretty city," he said. "We are here to preserve the tools with which the Imperium fights its greater wars. If that means burning 1 million souls to keep 1 billion from falling, we will do it." He paused. "And yet each of those souls is still the Emperor's. We are their guardians, whether they know us or not." He stabbed a finger toward the glowing breach rune. "Greymane, you will take your pack and form the vanguard of our relief to the northern wall. You will stabilize that breach and hold it until my armored spearhead can strike. You will not withdraw until I command it, or you are dead. Do you understand?" "Yes, my Jarl." Hakon's fist thudded against his breastplate. "By tooth and steel, the wall will hold." Ulfric's mouth twitched in something almost like a smile. "It had better. I would hate to have to come down there and hold it myself." A ripple of humor passed through the chamber, brief and sharp. As the briefing dissolved into tactical detail, Skorvald drifted closer to Hakon's shoulder. "Careful with that promise," the wolf priest murmured. "Walls are hungry things. They remember the ones who swear to them, and war has a long memory." Hakon's eyes stayed on the hololithic breach. "If the wall stands because I swore, then the words are well spent." Skorvald made a non-committal noise. "We shall see." The drop pod screamed through atmosphere, a steel coffin wrapped in flame. Hakon sat strapped into his harness, armor maglocked to the deck. His helm display filled with streaming data. Entry vectors, Auspex returns, Vox chatter, snatches of mortal transmissions. "North Wall holding for now, need reinforcements at..." "This is Galatea Medicae Station 12. We are at capacity. Repeat, at cap. Emperor, if you hear me, please, my children, they're still in." The pod's machine spirit tried to filter out non-essential traffic. Hakon overrode it. He listened. He did not feel sorrow as mortals did. That had been refined, burned and reforged into other things long ago. But he felt the weight of it, settling on his shoulders like another layer of ceramite. These were the voices of the people whose lives his orders would measure and spend. "Brothers," he voxed to his pack over a private channel, "when we hit the ground, the defenders will see us. Their courage will tether itself to ours. Do not let them see you falter." Bjarki's chuckle came back at once. "I intend to look magnificent, not falter." "Magnificence is wasted if you die in the first volley," Torvald rumbled. "Impact in 30 seconds," the pod's spirit intoned. "Glory to the Emperor. Glory to the wolf. Glory," Hakon answered. A last shuddering impact. The howling descent ended in a brutal slam as the pod plowed into ferrocrete. Explosive bolts fired, petals of ceramite blowing outward. Smoke and hot, chemical air crashed in. Hakon was already moving. Harness clamps blew free, and he surged out into a world of fire. The northern wall of Hive Galatea loomed ahead. What remained of it? Smoke boiled from shattered bastions. A great, jagged gap yawned where artillery and treachery had chewed the curtain down to a rubble slope. That slope was choked with bodies, wreckage, burning hab debris. And the enemy, cultists in ragged uniforms and makeshift armor, surged toward the breach, screaming praises to gods that were not gods. Mutant things loped among them. Behind the press of flesh came looted tanks daubed with blasphemies, guns hammering at the wall. "Form on me," Hakon roared. The iron wolves spilled from the pod in a storm-grey line. Bolters barked, each shot a hunted kill. Cultists exploded into meat and rags. The surge faltered, then closed again. High on the broken parapet, defenders fought back in ragged knots. Guardsmen in battered flak armor. A squad of sororitas dug in around a heavy bolter. Vox masts bent and smoking. The wall's guns that still functioned spat fire over the breach. Hakon's helm magnified one section of firing step. There, an officer in a torn greatcoat, bareheaded, hair bound back in a dark cord slick with sweat and blood. She stood amid the chaos with power sword in hand and a command vox clutched in the other, shouting orders that somehow cut through the din. "Hold the Emperor-damned line," she screamed. "If they break us here, they break Galatea. First rank, fire. Second rank, fire." An artillery shell detonated close by, blowing a chunk out of the parapet. Men and women flew. The officer went to one knee, then forced herself up again. "Greymane," Bjarki voxed. "We should push past them. Link with the inner bastions." "Our orders." "I know our orders," Hakon said. He was already angling toward the rubble ramp that led up to the firing step. "Our orders are to hold the breach. That means the wall does not fall. Not today." He climbed. The rubble shifted under his armored boots, slick with blood and fat. Lasbolts hissed past his helm. He shot a charging cultist from the hip without breaking stride, stepped over the corpse, and vaulted the last broken stones to stand on the firing step. The nearest guardsman flinched at the sudden presence of so much ceramite and wrath. One young trooper half-turned his lasgun toward Hakon before a veteran cuffed the barrel down. "Astartes," the man snarled. "Use your thrice-cursed eyes." Hakon ignored them, his attention fixed on the officer. She was smaller up close than she had looked through the lens, gaunt with exhaustion, armor blackened. Her left gauntlet was cracked. Bone showed white where the flesh beneath had been torn. She had wrapped it and kept going. "Who commands here?" Hakon asked. "I do," she said, turning toward him, eyes hard. "Captain Elira Voss, 217th Karen PDF, acting commander of the Northern Wall. And you are late, Astartes." There was no awe there, no pleading, only anger and the bone-deep tiredness of someone who had been trying to hold back the tide with bare hands. "I am Hakon Greymane of the Iron Wolves," he said. "You are not dead. By my reckoning, that means we are early." Several nearby troopers snorted despite themselves. Elira's mouth twitched. "Can you hold this breach, Hakon Greymane?" "Yes." He felt the words settle like a stone. "Then do it," she said. She jerked her chin toward the burning hive beyond. "Because if they get through here, there's nothing between them and the hive heart but evac corridors, unarmed workers, and children who should have been gone days ago." She met his blank helm lenses without flinching. "On your oath?" she asked. He could have given her the Jarl's orders. He could have pointed out that he was already bound by duty and gene seed and all the weight of the Imperium. But the words she asked for were different. She wanted promise, not protocol. He thought of Ragnar half-word for the span of a heartbeat. "On my oath," Hakon said. "This breach will not fall while I draw breath." Something in her shoulders eased. "Then welcome to the wall," she said. "Try not to die too quickly." The battle that followed was a blur of noise and blood sharpened into hard-edged moments. Hakon and his pack spread along the breach, turning gaps into killing fields. Bjarki anchored the left flank, chain axe roaring and laughter bubbling over the Vox. Torvald set up his multi-melter in a half-collapsed emplacement, its hungry growl a constant undertone. "Armor first," Hakon voxed. "The guard can deal with the rabble. Every shell you spend on a cultist is one not burning a tank." "Understood," Torvald replied. A looted Lehman Russ rumbled toward them, its hull draped in chains of skulls. Its first shell punched a crater into the parapet 2 meters from Hakon's position, showering him with shrapnel. Guardsmen died screaming. "Torvald," Hakon said. The multi-melter roared. A lance of white-hot energy struck the Russ's frontal plate. Armor sagged, ran, then burst. The tank became a momentary sun, then a wreck. The defenders cheered raggedly. "Do not celebrate," Hakon said. "They have more." They did. Wave after wave came on cultists, mutants, traitor guardsmen. Mortars thumped, artillery howled. The wall shook. Men and women died by inches, by meters, by foolish acts of courage and unlucky shots. Between salvos, Elira moved the fragments of her regiment like a knife. shoring weak points, rotating squads, dragging half-broken survivors back into the fight. Hakon watched her as he fought. Once, in a brief lull, he stood beside her at the firing step, while her Vox operator retuned his failing set. "You know them all?" Hakon said, nodding toward the squads. "Most," Elira replied, without looking away from the field. "That's Corporal Venn, neck tattoo, ugly as a boot. He broke yesterday and ran when the first daemons came. Spent the night begging to be allowed back on the wall. He's more afraid of his own shame now than of the enemy. He'll hold." "And her?" Hakon indicated a sergeant with a half-melted bionic eye, barking precise orders as she redistributed ammo. "Sergeant Flint," Elira said, "lost her wife and both children in the first week of shelling. Transferred from garrison duty to the front line by personal request. She fights like there is nothing left the enemy can take." Hakon watched Flint for a moment longer, weighing what he saw. "She will be the last to fall," he said. "That sounds like prophecy." An observation, another shell screamed in, and the moment was over. Midway through the siege, the world shuddered. It began as a tremor beneath Hakon's boots, different to artillery. The stone underfoot flexed minutely. Frost formed for a heartbeat on exposed metal. Smoke drifted wrong, tugged sideways by no wind he could feel. "Seismic event," Megos Ilex 9 voxed from orbit. "Source sub-basement levels, Hive Galatea. Correlation with—" His voice dissolved into static. The air vibrated with an almost inaudible whisper. Hakon's vision blurred. For a moment he saw not the breach but a corridor deep beneath the hive, rusted, bleeding from the walls, lit by a light that was not light. Tall, elegant things of brass and blade moved through the smoke, smiling mouths full of too many teeth. He snarled and forced the image away. "Rune Priest," he voxed up to the fleet, "we have bleed through." "Confirmed," came Halvar Stormeye's distant reply, thin and strained. "A warding seal has broken below your position. We are counterworking. Keep your minds hard, do not listen." On the wall near Hakon, a young guardsman dropped his lasgun and clutched his head, whimpering. A sororita strode over and slapped him across the face with a ceramite gauntlet. "The Emperor watches," she hissed. "Stand." The whispers receded to the edges of hearing, like distant surf. Elira leaned on the parapet, breathing hard. "For a second," she said quietly, "I saw the lower conveyors. My father used to take me there when I was a girl. This time the steel was bleeding." "Look up," Hakon said. "The danger in front of you bleeds normally when you shoot it." She snorted once, shaky but genuine, and turned back to the battlefield. As the day bled toward dusk, the enemy changed tactics. Artillery fire slackened, Vox signals crackled. The warp-tainted presence that was Vardek began to move forward, looming at the rear of his lines like a dark star. When he reached a point just beyond the outer killing ground, the shelling stopped entirely. It was as if the world inhaled. A voice boomed across the battlefield, carried by Vox and something uglier. "Defenders of Galatea," Vardek called. "You have fought well, better than your masters in the spire, who fled at the first sign of judgment. Lay down your arms, open your gates. Join me and I will be merciful." There was a psychic undertone to the words, a greasy pressure against the mind. Hakon felt it slide off his transhuman will like oil off armor. Many of the guardsmen did not. Hakon saw hands slacken on lasguns. One trooper dropped to his knees, sobbing. Elira lunged for the nearest command vox, seized it and overrode the channel with a scream of feedback. "Soldiers of Galatea," she shouted, her voice raw but blazing. "You know that voice. That is the man who ordered us shelled while we pulled civilians from the Habs. I watched him shoot his own adjutant for questioning an order. If he speaks of mercy, it is because he has run out of ammunition." She drew breath. "You want mercy? You want an end to this? Then stand. Hold your lasguns. Make him choke on every meter of ground he tries to take. Die if you must, but do it as Imperial soldiers, not as his slaves." Around Hakon, he felt the line stiffen. On the far side of the field, Vardek laughed. The sound warped. "Brave words, Captain Voss," he called. "Last words, perhaps." He raised a sword wreathed in sickly light. The traitor host surged forward one last time, tighter, more disciplined, corrupted Astartes striding among them. "Ulfric to all packs," came the Jarl's vox, his voice underlaid by the rumble of engines. "Our armored spear is almost in place. Greymane, you must hold that breach for 1 more hour. No retreats, no collapse. 1 hour and I kill their heart." "Hour," Hakon said. "We will hold." Time shattered into smaller fractions. At 30 minutes, a section of wall to the left collapsed completely. Bjarki took Torvald and a clutch of brothers to plug the new hole, leaving Hakon with fewer Astartes on the main breach. At 45 minutes, Vardek's corrupted Astartes reached the wall, hulking figures in twisted plate. One vaulted up onto the rubble, chain axe screaming. Hakon met him, power sword flashing, and cut him down in 3 savage strokes. At 55 minutes, a shell, stray or guided by malice he never knew, detonated near Elira's position. The blast hurled her against the parapet. She slid down, leaving a smear of blood. For a heartbeat, Hakon saw the line buckling in the absence of her voice. He vaulted the gap to her side. A medic scrambled toward them, wide-eyed. "Back to your post," Hakon said, blocking the man with one gauntleted hand. "Your lasgun is needed more than your trembling hands." The medic faltered, then saluted and staggered back to the line. Hakon lifted Elira carefully and propped her where she could see over the parapet. Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto his helm. "Still holding?" she rasped. "Yes. Knew you would," she whispered. Hakon toggled his external vox to root through the wall's loudhailers. "Soldiers of Galatea," he called, voice amplified to a rolling thunder. "Your captain bleeds, but she has not broken. Neither will you. You will stand. You will fire. You will kill what is in front of you, and the next, until there are no more, or you fall across the threshold. There is no retreat. There is only duty. Do you understand?" The answer rose from exhausted throats as a roar. "For Galatea, for the captain, for the emperor." Lasfire flared anew. The line held. And then, at last, the hour ended. Engines howled over the crash of small arms fire as Ulfric's spearhead struck. Predators and land raiders burst from the smoke on the enemy flank, guns blazing. Lasgun and beams scythed through traitor armor. Heavy bolters turned fleeing cultists to slurry. "Now, Greymane," Ulfric voxed. "Drive them back into my jaws." Hakon set Elira carefully down against the inner wall. "Watch," he said. "You asked whether we could hold. Now see what comes of holding." He rose, sword humming, storm bolter heavy in his hand. "Iron wolves?" he roared over vox and loudhailer both. "Forward!" What remained of his pack gathered to him, armor scorched, helms scarred, some limping but unbowed. They surged down the rubble slope into the faltering enemy, a grey fist smashing into a cracking skull. In the midst of the retreating tide, Vardek strode forward to meet them, tall and terrible in baroque plate, his helm twisted into a horned visage. "Loyalist," he sneered, his voice oily even through armor. "You cling to a dying world. Your emperor rots. Why continue this farce?" Hakon advanced, boots crunching on bone and rubble. "I fight," he said, "because there is no one else." Their blades met in the ruin of the breach, loyal power fields snarling against warp-tainted energy. The shock rattled stones. Vardek was fast, faster than any unaltered man. Warp energy coiled around his limbs, lending him strength and speed. His sword struck in flurries of dark light. Hakon answered with economy and patience. He had been forged for war since before Vardek's ancestors were born. He blocked when he had to, yielded a step when he must, took ground when he could. Once, Vardek's blade slipped past his guard and scraped along his gorget. Warning runes flared. Another heartbeat, another few centimeters, and Hakon's head would have rolled. "Your oath will kill you," Vardek hissed, pressing forward. "These mortals will forget you. I can offer—" Hakon slammed his shoulder into Vardek's chest, breaking his rhythm, and drove his knee into the traitor's thigh. The corrupted commander staggered. Hakon's sword flashed, taking Vardek's left hand at the wrist. Warp fire erupted, a psychic shock that killed 3 guardsmen outright and knocked Hakon to one knee. For a heartbeat, he was nowhere, standing on a plain of ash under a black sun, ringed by things with too many eyes. He clawed his way back to himself. Vardek lunged for his throat. Hakon twisted, trapped the traitor's sword arm against his pauldron, and rammed his own blade up under Vardek's breastplate and into his primary heart. "On my oath," he said quietly. He twisted. Vardek convulsed. Something black and shrieking tore itself out of the dying man like smoke, tried to take flight, and was shredded by a sudden crackle of unseen force as Halvar Stormeye's distant will clamped down on the warp breach. Vardek's body toppled down the rubble slope, crashing among his own followers. The sight of their champion broken shattered what courage remained. The traitor line dissolved into a rout. 10 minutes later, only the dead and the too stubborn to die remained on the breach. The Medicae station stank of antiseptic, smoke, and tired prayer. Cots lined the inside of a hastily erected shelter. Servo skulls hovered, projecting pale light over bandaged forms. Hakon ducked through the entrance. Conversations faltered as mortals turned wide eyes on the armored giant suddenly in their midst. "At ease," he said. "You have done enough standing for one day." He moved carefully among the cots, trying not to disturb drips and wires with his bulk. He paused once beside a trooper whose chest was wrapped in blood-stained bandages. The man's eyes tracked him weakly. "Did we hold?" the guardsman whispered. Yes, Hakon said. You held. The trooper smiled, a small cracked thing, and let his eyes close. Hakon found Elira on a cot near the center. Her ribs were splintered, her head bandaged, but her eyes were clear. You kept your word, she said as he loomed over her. So did you, Hakon replied. How many did it cost, she asked. Fewer than the alternative, he said. It was not the answer she wanted, but it was the only one that did not cheapen the dead with arithmetic. She snorted softly. You Astartes and your careful words. You sought my oath, Hakon said. Do not pretend you did not know what you were asking. I knew exactly what I was asking, Elira said. I'd been the only one on this wall making promises for too long. I wanted to see what happened when a demigod had to carry one as well. You will not make a habit of it, Skorvald said from the entrance, amusement and warning mixed in his tone. The wolf priest approached, helm maglocked at his belt, his skull-tattooed face lined. You have taken on another chain, Hakon, he said when they stepped back outside into the smoke-tinged air. I made an oath and kept it, Hakon replied. The breach held. The world stands. For now, Skorvald said, and you know as well as I do that such things echo. These mortals will remember the Iron Wolf who swore to their wall and bled to hold it. One day, someone will send a call into the void and expect you to answer because of it. If I can, Hakon said quietly, I will. Skorvald sighed, but pride lurked in the sound. Remember that your first oath is to the chapter and to the Emperor, he said. Not to any one wall. Not to any one captain. I remember, Hakon said. He looked back toward the breach, now choked with wrecks and bodies. But the Emperor rules through them too. The wolf priest shook his head. You will make my work interesting, Hakon Greymane.
3 days later, the fires at Galatea's north wall had cooled from white-hot to sullen orange. The worst of the screams had faded. Civilians crawled out of shelters to begin the work of surviving whatever came next. In a shattered courtyard near the breach, a small crowd gathered. Guardsmen in ill-fitting dress jackets, sororitas in scorched plate, a handful of Astartes. Before them, bolted into the scorched rockcrete, stood a simple stone plaque. Ha stood the line, it read. Beneath a column of names, not nearly long enough to hold them all. Elira, upright but pale, ribs still bound under her uniform, stood before the plaque. I am not a priest, she said to the gathered troops. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you the Emperor has a special plan for any of us. What I will say is this. When it mattered, we did not run. She nodded toward Hakon and the other Iron Wolves. We had help, she went on. But we still had to pull our triggers, hold our ground, and decide that this was where we made our stand. That's what this stone is for. Not glory. Just memory. She stepped back, and to Hakon's mild surprise, gestured for him to come forward. He took a moment to scan the faces before him, exhausted, scarred, marked by loss but still standing. When we first saw this world from orbit, he said, it was a mark on a star chart. Tithe quotas, manufactoria outputs, strategic value. He looked at the plaque. Now, when I think of Charon's Gate, I will remember this wall, he said. I will remember the men and women who stood here when they had every reason to flee. He paused. I cannot promise you a gentle future, he said. This galaxy does not permit such things. But know this, what you did here mattered. It changed the shape of a wider war. And if, one day, Galatea calls for aid again, there is at least one Iron Wolf whose ears will prick at the sound. Beside him, Elira gave him a sideways look. On your oath, she murmured. Hakon considered the stone, the names cut into it, the burned skyline behind it. The weight of Ragnar's statue still sat at the back of his mind. On my attention, he said, for now. There was a ripple of rough laughter. A corporal with a crude Aquila tattoo stepped forward and laid his hand on the plaque. For Galatea, he said. For Charon's Gate. Others echoed. For the Emperor. The words rolled over Hakon like a tide. Not a storm this time. Something quieter. Something that could settle and harden into a new layer of armor. Later, as Vargbjorn broke orbit and Charon's Gate dwindled to a smoldering ember on the display, Hakon stood alone at a viewing port. Until next time, he murmured. He did not yet know how true that would be. He did not know that the oath he had spoken on the breach would follow him into other wars, other darknesses. For the moment, it was enough that this world still turned under the Emperor's light, stubborn and scarred. The weight of oaths lay heavy on his shoulders. He bore it,